where lust for a whole life and nothing but less makes people jump out of a comfortable pond into an unknown ocean. Welcome to that journey between the East and the West. Who says Rolling Stones don't gather moss? Hello everyone, I am Meenu Gupta, your host for the day, and I'm delighted to have you join me every week as amazing people share their incredible and inspiring life stories of straddling continents. Thank you. Stay tuned. Dear listeners, our guest for the day, Erica Micheletti, seems to reinvent herself in many ways in her life. Born and brought up in a country which is on the travel bucket list of most people across the world, she has lived, worked, and hoped between the East and the West. From bartending in the US to scuba diving or scuba training in Australia, to leading an Italian company in India, and now in the field of tourism in her country of origin, Italy. She is a Rolling Stone who's gathered moss.
Thank you, Meenu.
Thank you, Erica, for joining me. And we look forward to sharing and swapping experiences, or for me, listening more.
Yes.
So I will begin with that first question, which I usually pamper my guests with, or they pamper me with their answers. Who are you without the labels? Without the name, without the labels of mother, wife, daughter, work, or anything?
I'm a person, I would say, that has always been extremely curious about what was around the world, probably. But more than around the world, what it is, then it's out there that I don't see it as yet. And so it was really my driving, my push has always been, I want to know. I want to go and see what's out there. So that's probably curiosity, I would say. I'm a very curious person. And I hope also a kind person. I'm never able to sit and, just enjoy it. I always feel that I should be doing something that I'm not wasting, because I don't waste any of my time, even if I sit or allow myself sometimes to sit. But no, after I finish something, there is immediately something else that is coming in my mind. So in a nice way, yes.
Share with us how your journey began. How did you end up doing all that, or figuring out all that, or did you figure that at all? Just share with us right from the beginning.
Okay, so I think it's extremely important to first explain a little bit about my. Okay, so I think it's extremely important to first explain a little bit about my background. I'm from a very small city in Tuscany with about 100,000 people. For India, probably would be just a village, but in Italy, we call it city. And being Italian as well, it is something a little bit unusual what I've been doing. So coming from this kind of reality where everything was very easy, you walk to school, but you don't really have a lot of people, I would say, then they would do things a little bit out of the standard, the usual kind of life that you have. But I had my dad. My dad then was working for a very big company in Italy, and he was marketing director of that company. And that has brought him to actually be exposed to a lot of different, I would say, ambient, and as well to travel a lot. So as a little kid, I used to see my dad going to Milan for a few days, come back, being in Russia, come back, be in Tokyo, Japan, and all these kind of countries. And for me, it was like, wow, that is so cool. And so having seen that or seen my dad traveling has probably what has seeded on me. That curiosity, I knew that there was much more out there that I wanted to do. And so as I finished, I did all my schooling and everything. And what I knew for sure was, okay, now that I've done with all my duty, I want to go and travel or, go out. So I started, my very first experience was just about 2 hours away from where I live. And I worked as a waitress in a fish restaurant. And for me was the first experience outside, the first proper working experience, and plus completely by myself, though my parents would come every weekend. But so that was already one step out. There, then I met people. I realized that a lot of youngsters, my sort of age, they had travel, or they would go for a year or spend the winter traveling. And I was like, so then, it's not unusual what I want to do. It is normal, As soon as you come out of Arezzo, the city where I come from, there is a completely different reality. And that has pushed me even more. So I would say that I had people. I was very curious as a person, and plus I had people, or I've chosen maybe situation where they let me then to go again, to do what I wanted to do, to find the courage to do it. And so I started with that. And then after that very first experience, I was like, okay, now I need to go somewhere. I needed to improve my English. So I remember coming back. Obviously, I had my money at that stage, and coming back to my parents, going, I'm planning to go somewhere. And they were like, sort of semi-jokingly, oh, yes, whatever, do whatever you want. And so I ended up in a travel agency, and I bought my ticket. And so for me, English, I was like, I can't go to England because all the time that we ended up in England, we come back not talking in English because there is a lot of Italian. So I was like, no, I need to do something a bit more extreme. So, okay, America. So I ended up in Miami. And that was the very first big experience abroad. And then Miami led me to Guatemala, Belize, Mexico. Then I got back. Then I went for 1 year in Australia. And then again, back after a year. And in every country that I've been, because I was open to experiences, and I never really went with, okay, I'm going there because I want to do this. I'm just open, just enjoy, travel, live, and see what life brings you. So in every country that I've been, Australia is very known for scuba diving, or at least is, the Great Barrier Reef, one of the most beautiful piece of jewelry that the nature has given us. It's in there. And I was like, well, I'm in Australia. I think I should invest my money, because then you are also conscious, then, the more you are self-independent, the more your traveling can last. So I've invested all my savings and became a dive master in Australia. And I was like, so this, and I used to love it, something then, once again, I would have never thought that I would end up doing, scuba diving. But I was open for this experience, and I did it. And then I worked the last 6 months in Australia as a guide, underwater guide, for a company in Australia. And yeah.
When you first went to that travel agency, to take that first ticket out of Italy to the US, you got the courage to do that. But how did you decide, okay, America, okay. Did you say itsy mitsy miny mo on a map? Okay, here is this where I'll go.
Well, listen, I was, it makes me laugh when I think about it, but it was a very basic, once again, you're not very exposed. So in my mind, there was only New York, or I don't know why, but my mind took in consideration only New York or Miami. And New York for me was, yes, an amazing city, but very much a city. And so, I was like, oh my gosh, what if if my soul get lost there? It's very difficult to connect to people in such big cities. And I thought, well, Miami has the sea. So if the worst comes to the worst, that I feel lonely, that I don't know what to do, as Italian, I can go and up on the beach and, knowing that there was the beach there, I felt more secure.
Okay, that gave you comfort.
Comfort.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I knew a little bit of English, but what the Italian school can leave you. And funny enough, English was probably one of my worst subjects. And so, no, I didn't know English. I couldn't not have a conversation with a person, not even the simplest. I just knew a few words. So my dad, obviously, when I got back after the travel agency going, okay, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. They were like, what? I said, yes, this is the ticket. I told you that I was going to do it. You said then, it wasn't any problem. So my parents were like, oh my gosh, she's actually going. And I was like, yeah, I'm going. And so my dad, I remember asking my dad to write this little piece of paper, which he printed with his computer. Remember that we are talking about 25 years ago nearly, 24 years ago. So he printed this little piece of paper, and I had the first 2 nights booked into an hostel because I thought to myself, at least I know where to go, for the first 2 nights, because obviously I didn't want everything organized. It should have been, a day-to-day sort of experience. So he wrote this piece of paper to give direction to the taxi driver to take me to the place because I was not able to communicate. So, and I can, if I close my eyes, I can still see the taxi driver, me giving, this piece of paper to the driver, and he took me there. And yes, it's quite something, really. Yeah.
Yes, actually calls for courage from all people, from you as well as your parents. Because now when I look back, when I think as a parent, I would be like, oh my God, my daughter's going to an unknown place far away without a word of English.
I don't know if I would. And I have to thank my parents for, they were a little bit crazy as well, if I think about it, But now I'm like, wow, what have I done? What they have done for me. And I'm not sure if tomorrow I would be able to do the same for my child.
Courage and the backing of a loving family. Erica made the most of God's given gifts and ventured into America without knowing a single word of English. How many of you have attempted something similar? If you have, do write in to us to be featured in a 5-minute exclusive 1-to-1 cameo slot.
And so this is the proof sometimes then, yes, we just need to let them be. Yeah, I'm not sure in 10 years' time if I would do the same.
Now, they just gave you room for freedom and to find yourself in a way, to flower, which is amazing. I just find that amazing and very beautiful. And lucky both ways, you and them.
Yes. But, at the time, I didn't think I was courage. It was just this really strong need of traveling. And I knew then if I was going to wait for a friend or somebody else, it would have never happened. Never. So I just knew then this is the only way that I can do it, and I'm gonna do it.
And you didn't feel alone there? I mean, you didn't have those days where you would just weep and call your parents, "Oh, I'm feeling lonely." How old were you
I
then?
was 21. No, yeah, I mean, now I must have had moments where I was a little bit more fragile,
Mhm.
but I never really felt lonely. Also because I'm quite happy with myself. You know, I can be alone and not feeling all lonely. I actually quite love my own time. So, and I think then, and we're talking, you know, obviously, I'm not a person that has achieved the peace of mind, but I'm quite comfortable with myself. You know,
Okay. So that's nice. So you didn't have all those moments one might think of when, okay, oh, it was a bad decision, nothing like that.
no, a little
went with the
bit
flow.
in India. I had it. The first year has been a little bit tough, but it was also a completely different situation. You know, I was there, I was working, I wasn't traveling. When I was traveling, I was literally backpacking. So you always find people. You always have, you know, you are much more open to meet people. And maybe you travel 3 days with a group of people and then, you know, you decide to move somewhere else. But you always have somebody. You are always busy in choosing what is your day. So you don't really feel that kind of loneliness. In India, I was there, but India came later, after Australia and after a year where I tried to settle back and have a normal life, which didn't last. And so, you know, I went in India working, knowing that I would have spent time there.
Okay, so when just a question, curiosity. So how did you decide? How do you decide when you had to leave a place? Okay, my time is up, and now I need to either go back or I need to now look for another adventure in life.
Okay, for the very first trip to America, I knew it because I had, you know, bought my ticket and it was a 6 month ticket. So I knew when I was leaving, you know, it was an open ticket and when to come back. And I knew then, you know, I wanted to travel, you know, I wanted to work 3 months in the States and then traveling in Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. So I nearly, you know, I had a date when I was coming back in Miami. Whilst in Australia, no, because in Australia, I was supposed to come back after 6 months. But then I fell in love with the lifestyle and the scuba diving. And I was like, no, I can't leave. I need to do this here. And I remember my dad was, when I called them, typically I used to call my dad when I needed to do something crazy, you know, or change drastically my plan, because I knew then I would have had support from him to face my mom and let her metabolize, then I wasn't coming back. But weirdly enough, that time was the other way around. So in Australia, I was supposed to come back in November, and I called my dad and I was like, you know what? I was thinking, you know, this is a great opportunity. I want to become a dive master. And I think I should do it here, you know, because Australia is probably the best place in the world. And my dad is like, no, but you can't. You know, you're supposed to come back in 3 days, in a week time. No, you can. How are we going to say to your mother? And I was like, well, don't worry, I will talk to her. And, you know, and then the more the conversation was going ahead, the more I was realizing then was my dad, then it wasn't right. You know, he was not happy with this decision. And I think we had a little bit of an argument. And the problem was then the next day he was leaving to India. So for a week, he was going to India for work. And so I had a week since he was coming back that I didn't know what to do. Because he hadn't, you know, at the time he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he didn't say anything. And I was in a limbo, like, what am I supposed to do? Am I going back? Am I staying here? You know, what it is. And so he went to India, and I remember talking to my mom, and I was like, I don't understand why dad has done this to me. You know, he has left, now I can talk to him. And because somehow, although I was very independent, I always needed the proof of my parents, especially my dad. And I remember then, you know, at that stage, my mom was actually happy for me to stay and do also this experience. And lucky for me, after a week of India, my dad came back and he was like, well, you know, I remember calling him going, so what should I do? And my dad was like, I think you already decided. So why are you asking me? And in a way, it was like, you know, you're still there, you were there, so just do it. And then he was more happy than me, because when I started to send him videos of whales that I was seeing under the water or the beauty, he was like, I'm so happy that you stayed and you've done it, you know? And then I remember one day I was in Perth. This was after months. So I've been working, I become a master. And one day I was like, you know what, enough, like this. I remember flying back from Perth to Sydney, just to start, because I was flying back, from Sydney. And I was like, okay, now I start to get close to Sydney and see when. And as I got to the airport in Sydney, landing from Perth, I randomly went and checked with the hair assistant, about the changing of the ticket, when I can change it, when I cannot change it. She said, well, if you want it, even tonight. And I was like, okay, tonight. And I remember calling my parents, going, so in 24 hours, I'm coming back home. And they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's time for me, like this.
It's amazing. It's also an amazing feeling, no?
It's beautiful,
to know that there's a place in the world you can go back to and call it home.
Exactly. And even now, if I think about it, why I did it that way, I don't know. It just felt I was done with, I was ready to go back and be happy to go back. So, yeah.
Interesting. But it's nice. I think what I get from what you're saying, that means your parents' place in Italy was like, and their love, of course, the family, was like an anchor. So you could go around, explore, do your thing, and you knew that there was a safe place to go back.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah. I always knew that there was a place to go back. Also because I always left, not because I had problems. I wasn't running away from anybody, I just needed to understand who I was and what I wanted simply by myself without any influence from them. But obviously the influence was there, eradicated, because for me, it's always my landmark, so I can always go back there. And also because my dad always been very clear, in this house, you haven't decided to come to this world because we parents decided that we wanted you. So I will always give you a place to stay and a place to eat and something to eat, That will always be there in this house for you as well as my sister. Anything extra, no, you have to think about yourself. But food and sleep, you can always count. And knowing that, then there is always somebody asking you, it also makes you feel more comfortable to just do your experience.
Yeah, more free to explore different parts of yourself and to know yourself better and to push the envelope or to know what the envelope contains or can contain. I get that's very interesting. And the one, so between, from what I hear, different places that you lived in, also Mexico and here and there you went. And when we say the East and the West, the most East place you lived in for the longest time was
Yes.
India, right?
Yeah.
Were
For
you in
11
India
years
then?
almost.
And how was the experience of living different from other countries?
Well, first of all, and it is something that for me, it's very important. I always say to everybody, because I really strongly believe this. We need to understand then, to my point of view, there is India and the rest of the world, you know? And because there's no other places in this planet that can be, does go even close to be India. So, you know, if you go to Thailand, I've been to Thailand, way easy, you know, Thailand, and it's just 3 hours flight, you know, and they are one next to another. So you think, well, you know, a little bit like, yes, Italians and German, and the Germans are very different, but sort of, you know, you find a sort of continuity of what is the culture in a way. So this is important because in India, or either you love it or you don't love, you know, or you hate it. So in order to be able to live in India, you have to be extremely open-minded, not making any comparison, because there's nothing to compare. You know, the moment that you do the comparison, you make the mistake of disqualifying India in a way, or giving too much importance to the other countries. You know, I love India. It's because it's amazing in the worst scenario as well in the most beautiful part. I mean, I've seen the worst things happening in India as well the most beautiful thing. And so, yes, you need to be open, and I was open to that. And I did make the comparison at the beginning, and that's why I struggled. The first part, that's you learn, you understand.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, you know, I loved it. I simply loved it, India. So that's why I was able to stay there for 11 years. You're not able to stay in India just to squeeze India because of, you know, work or whatever. No, India rejects you, you know. You get sent back immediately.
It's interesting. There are two things I find interesting. One is that the first part you said was a challenge because you were comparing India to other countries, and then you realized and accepted, and then it became a more of a love journey, right? And the second part I find interesting is you literally speak of India like a person, that India accepts you or rejects you. I find that interesting because few other people also don't treat India as it. So that's interesting. And so in your mind, India is as a person, is a he or a she? Just out of curiosity, she. Very interesting.
For me, the she.
And why would that be?
I see like the mother of the civilization, sort of, yeah, like mother, you know, the mother of the nature, the mother of the mind. There is something in there, you know, which is with the open arms. That's how I see India. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting, actually. Yeah, for me to understand. And when you said the challenges that I understood because of comparisons, of course, one can't really compare. But in terms of working, what were the challenges that you had to face in India, which you think could have been different in the West, let's say?
So when I went at the beginning in India, well, the situation, as you are aware, you know, I was welcomed by probably not also the best, not the best people in terms then they were nasty to me, not at all, but not very interested. Or when, so that is a big, the person then, should help you. I don't think I was the perfect person, let's put it in this way. And so that it didn't really help me to get into the country. But because probably, I don't know, no.
So you had a challenging team.
I had a challenging team. And that was the first one. And secondly, I thought, okay, I'm going to get into the office. Yes, I don't know anybody, but I will get to know people in the office. And then, you start with them, you go out for dinner, you do, for me it was like it's up in Italy. But then once you're there, you realize that no, the society is different. It's a different kind of setting. And so the people in the office, or the girls, in the office would have never come with me, or at least not at the beginning. First of all, because, you think then they live next to you, but they're not. They do long journeys to get to the office. Secondly is the society. So it's not, that you come out in the evening, where are you going? And secondly, because I was the boss. I was seen as a boss. And there's no chance, or at least at that time, because I must say that things have also changed a lot in the last 20 years. So, I'm talking back then. Mm-hmm. It was just a different settings. So I found myself at the beginning, the very first year, struggling to find friends. Also because I was not into the expat circle. I was living very much an Indian life, surrounded by Indians. And so I couldn't really get through it. But then after a year, things have, I was like, no, I can't believe this is not happening for me. If it's something then, I always wished to be able to come to India, to work, this is my dream coming true. And I've been to South America, I've been everywhere and everything, I never had a problem. And here in India, I struggle. It was unacceptable for me and for my mind. And I was like, I need to find a way. And that's just switched the whole things. Literally a year after.
That's interesting. Yeah. Though there's no comparison in it, but there's only comparison in the thought process, which I've mentioned in my book, which will come out in a couple of months, between the East and the West. There was this one point for me traveling in public transport, for example. You know how it is in India. You have a chauffeur. You don't realize that you are privileged, but you realize it when you don't have it. and I remember in Hamburg when I had to take the metro, which is 10 minutes walking from my house, I would walk to the metro and I keep thinking to myself, what have I done? Why am I here? Why did I do this? Until one day I gave a kick in my head and I realized, okay, in India, that's a life, that's a journey. This is another journey to be enjoyed the way journeys should. And from that day onwards, the 10-minute walk became very nice. I would look at the trees, I would look at the people, I would just observe and enjoy. And that continues, a change in the attitude.
Yeah.
And that changed the way I experienced life also here. So it allowed me to open up and enjoy. And I hear that shift, that button. And I hear the same thing when you speak and you said, okay, one fine day you said, okay, this is what I wanted and here I am. And that shift probably changed the rest of your experience.
I thought, yes. Yeah, from that moment onwards, it's been just overall a beautiful journey with upside down.
Yeah,
because, within this amazing experience, there've been, literally upside down. But then, no, it is something that I would do it again over and over, you know. And now at the beginning, obviously, as we came back, it's now 6 years that I'm back to Italy, and I haven't gone back to India, also because between we had the COVID and everything. But I didn't miss it before. But now I want to go back, obviously just for a period of time, you know. But now I want to take my children and, you know, show what it's like. Yeah.
That's nice. So now, speaking of children, please tell us the romantic story. You met your husband in India, and your husband is
English.
from
Yes.
Britain. He's English,
Irish
English,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. So how did that happen? And you got married. I mean, you were there, and then you had your kids were born
my
there,
first
right?
one
Both of them?
was born there.
First one was born in
Yes.
India.
So I met Robert. He was already in India. So I met him because he was there. He set up this company in renewable energy. He was dealing into carbon credits. You know, his business been successful. So we met when he had just sold his business. No, actually we met before. Sorry, I got confused. Yeah, we met before, but it was just, happening anyway. And we met two friends, common friends. And, the funny part is then we all had the same circle of people, but we never met the 6 years before, I was in India since 6 years after, before meeting him. And he was there 8 years before meeting me. But, things has to happen when it's the right time. And in a sporting club, that's where, usually on the weekend, we would go, and it was very much expat people as well, Indians, but a little bit more, I would say, the globalized, a little bit more, yeah. And so that's where we met. The reason why I left India is because I had my son, and basically my son was coming up to be 2 years old, and it was about to send him to, nursery or some sort of, school. And that's where we realized then my culture, or anyway, our culture was very much, well, we knew that it was different, of course, but I didn't want my son to grow up in a culture that really and truly wasn't mine. Because I think it's also important to understand that when you go into places like India, and I think it's only in India, or maybe also in Nepal can happen, but I'm not sure, but India, you don't lose you shouldn't lose who you are. You should embrace what that country gives you. But it's not that suddenly, I become a yogi and change my name. That's obviously purely my view, my personal view. Of course I was open. I did yoga. I went to the Himalayas. I went to Vrindavan. I went to Varanasi, all these extremely spiritual places. But I always knew who I was. I never act or behaved like an Indian out of respect, because, if I used to see people, English person, walking around barefoot, and I'm like, why would you do that? Not even the Indians are doing it. Why would you, suddenly become a yogi? It doesn't belong to you, But all of these to say that basically, I didn't want to send my child with the driver to go to school, because I used to walk to go to school. That's how I grew up. And the fact then, because I'm in India, and I know that I'm already, I've got some privilege to be in India, because the society is different, yeah? It's formed differently. But that's not my normality, and I'm aware, I don't have a driver in Italy, like you mentioned before. In India, it is normal. But for me, it's not normal. So I know is a privilege, is also a necessity in India. It really a necessity. If you work if you run a business, you need to have a driver because otherwise you don't survive. You need to have help in the house. That's, I think, everybody should have help in the house. But it's part of the cycle. But it wasn't for me, no, that was no. My childhood has been with the farmyard of my grandfather. And the same has been for Robert, They used to breed horses in Northern Ireland. And so, we were like, no, let's go back and just give him what was our childhood, what we know, what we think it's normal.
And how did you decide between England and Italy then?
Well, we had a couple of years before, we had Oscar, my first son. I wanted to buy a house in Italy as an investment, really. And then Robert came along and with him, you know what, why don't we do it together? And so we had a place basically in Italy. So then, when we come back, we knew we had our own space. But saying that, I was very much open to live anywhere. If Robert was like, okay, let's move to Brazil because I need to do something there, I would have gone. So we checked also England. And I think that I just left the decision to Robert because for me it was the same. But then Robert realized that it's much better to live in Italy than in England. It's a better quality of life, I think. Food-wise, cost-wise, we are a little bit more laid back and yeah. And so, plus I had my parents here. It was just easy. So after 6 months, then we stayed a few months in England, a few months here. We were like, okay, we stay in Italy.
And did your sense of belonging have anything to do with that? Because you mentioned very particularly about culture. So is it something which you would call a calling of the roots?
No, I don't think then, culturally, no, I don't think that. Though I have roots, I feel that I have roots. Robert doesn't feel that he has roots. We have a different perception of what is roots. For him, it's more about the people. For me, it's about literally also the place, the place and the people. But no, it was just purely sort of, a random decision. We were like, it's better. I mean, I don't have to spend £30,000 per year or £15,000 per year in order to have a good education for my son. So, why be in England when in Italy you can have it for free? But it's also that is also important. It's a different approach. So you all start from the same level in Italy. You don't have to be rich in order to become, not to become somebody, but to study or to have the basic.
Life, like a river, does change course occasionally with reasons. Erica's next phase in life put more emphasis on which country to bring up her children in and where she feels a sense of belonging. She has an interesting perspective on why some people don't have a strong pull to their roots, while some do. For herself, she clearly knows where hope is. In Arezzo, Italy, a city near Florence, the charming Tuscan region. Most important, that is where she was born and brought up. Life has come full circle, and the river has reached home. I understand. For the basic education, it is free also in Italy, and yes, in places like where I stay in Hamburg in Germany, is also the same. And I share that feeling with you as well, that yes, I also felt that if my son was in India, probably he might, it's a sense of privilege then even for a middle class would get a driver and so on. And you are more protected. And Now that you are there in Italy and you look back, now we've looked back for your life a little bit with an sense of observation or a lens of observation, right? You're looking back on your journey. How does that feel?
I'm very proud because I look back and I don't have any regrets. You know, I've done what I wanted to do. And it just, you know, there was nothing or nothing had come on my way to stop me doing it. And it's that time when I'm telling people what I've done, then also when I'm talking, I realize and I'm like, my gosh, I've done also this, you know, that sounds so good. But obviously, you know, for me, it's been just a natural, you know, one after another and after another. But I'm happy. I'm happy of what I've done.
Now, yes, I understand that when you started traveling, all that scuba diving, you know, training there in the US, so on. The word diversity, when you also stayed in India, again, it was the longest that you stayed in India. What does the word diversity mean to you?
Well, that's a big question. When I was my teenage, 16, 17, and I was also very much, not a protester, but, you know, I was more of, you know, fight for your own rights, fight for the school, fight for this, you know, protesting and marching with friends, you know, for our own rights and saying to everybody, we are all the same. No, we're not all the same. And the worst things then can happen is to actually say that we are all the same, because we are not. But you realize this, you know, why you have your experience in life. And we are people, the beauty of the people is that we are different culture, different personality, different. And you have to embrace these differences in order not to have diversity. You know, if you realize, if you appreciate the fact that we are not the same, then you also accept diversity, which can be diversity in religion, can be diversity in culture, can be diversity in everything, you know?
Nice. It's only in embracing diversity that you are able to allow inclusion.
Yes.
Yes, and being aware of it and embracing it and not going against it. No, we are all the same. No, it is not. It's like a gender difference. Men and women are not equal, according to me.
Yes.
No, they're different.
Yes.
Beautifully different in every which way. And that's it.
I totally agree, you know.
There is a word which I remember you used when you were in India and you had met the expat community, and then you were interacting with some Indians who were more globalized. So for you, what does that term mean? Globalized?
Means then, you know, like in Italy, you have people, again, to pretend, you know, we do have differences in classes, you know, like in social. So when I refer to people, then they're more Indian people, then they're more globalized. I'm talking, and it's cruel to say it, but that's unfortunately the reality. Probably the people then they can afford to travel. Yeah, they are more exposed to the opportunity of traveling, so they see it. You know, they see more things. And you know, if I compare to myself to the person that does the cleaning of the stairs of my building, that person has never, you know, really left, probably even the city, which is, you know, it doesn't mean, but obviously I can have that certain kind of conversation because they're not even interested. So when I'm talking about Indian, then they're a bit more globalized. I'm talking about people, then they are, yes, they've been exposed and they literally have seen more things, different things.
Okay. So essentially for you, the word globalized means more exposure, more awareness coming out of exposure. So they've had the opportunity to view things and
Yeah.
places and people
Yes.
in different ways.
Yeah.
And then would you call yourself, if we had a term, a global citizen, what would that mean to you? And would you call yourself that?
Would I call myself a global citizen? Probably yes. Yeah. Because it's not just about traveling, but, I would be willing to move somewhere else and live there for time, not just traveling as well. But yeah. And yeah, I think there are people that they are, world citizen. More, and I would say the countries, I don't know, for me, English people are very global citizens as a attitude that they have. For me, yes, because they've always been, going around the world colonizing people in a way. So I think because they don't really like their place.
No, and I saw when you was explaining about that now earlier, a minute ago, just the idea of the willingness to travel and absorb a place was bringing a smile on your face. So you have this adventure is still in your soul,
Yes.
very much that. That is your identity in a way. Is there something inspiring that you would like to leave the listeners with after your journeys which still continues in different ways?
Yes, don't let the fear come on your way, because fear is part of the journey and it's a beautiful sensation. But if this fear stops you to do, from doing stuff, then it becomes your major enemy and you will never be able to see what's behind or beyond your, your nose. I was always scared before leaving any tour, any trip. But that was more of a thrilling. So, yes, I'm afraid, but I'm still doing it because I know it's going to be cool.
So, dear listeners, the parting shot of the message that Erica would like to leave us all with is don't stop doing an activity or then taking the next step because of fear. It's part of the process. Thank you so much, Erica, for joining us. And I wish you loads of luck.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you my life experience.
And that, my dear listeners, is Erica Micheletti. Go beyond your fears, says Erica, and follow your instincts. I have a question now for the audience. What does the word home signify to you? And where is home and why? Do write in and tell us. Thank you for listening to the series Between the East and the West. Do subscribe to the channels mentioned on the site in case you liked what you heard. I am Meenu Gupta, the host Between the East and the West. Stay tuned every week to be inspired. And we love feedback. Do drop us a line to tell us what you think. It matters. Till then, namaste and bye-bye.